Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Particle Accelerator Podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how technology accelerates their business. I'm here with Bert. Bert, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, great. Thanks, Benjamin. My name is Bert Wank, W-A-N-K. I'm the founder and CEO of infiniRel Corporation, which stands for Infinite Reliability.
Sweet. Cool, man. I want to learn more about infinite reliability. Why don't you tell me just a little bit more about that? You piqued my curiosity, and I just want to hear more about infiniRel real quick.
Yeah, sure. We all know that everything fails, right? So it seems to be a bit unsurmountable problem. However, now that we have a lot more technology in our disposal, lately we talk about artificial intelligence and predictive analytics, all these tools come together now where we have now a way or a system, a methodology that if you can predict the future, you can change the future. And we apply this to failures of what is currently one of the hotspots in the industry, which is electrification, particularly renewable energy. And many don't see failures directly, since a lot of those plants are way in the boonies. However, some of us actually do see failures on warehouses and fires. And so it becomes more and more a concern that what we're going to do with those failures. Failures cost a ton of money. So we have leveraged multiple technologies to bring them all together to actually give our clients that operate those solar and wind and battery farms to be the operational part to be a lot more efficient and cost effective, so we can actually scale renewables economically sustainable.
Awesome. That's really cool. All right, I'm going to get into some lightning round of questions so we can get to know you better.
Sure.
What was your first job?
My first job was actually a continuation of my practice in Switzerland, building test systems for electronic components, which is pretty much what I'm doing today.
Cool. Was there a toy or hobby that you had as a child that inspired what you do career-wise today?
I think so. Actually, my parents always were surprised that I barely could walk. I was drawn to my dad's stereo. And I took things apart. Sometimes it didn't come back together as I needed to. And then I realized that I'm a really good product tester, really destroying parts. And I wondered, why am I failing so quickly? So eventually that really drove my mission. And I really like things not to break as fast, even if you handle them a little rougher than you should. That really came full circle. And I always was in power, always in electronics. So my entire career is a red line through it. Just now, Earlier it was milliwatts, and now it's megawatts. So a small M to a big M.
Right. I know I took apart a toaster and it never went back together. So I absolutely can share in that. What was your favorite and least favorite course in college?
In college, I think anything that is mundane accounting numbers. Something that I'm not super excited about. I like to see a balance sheet being positive, but the mundane number crunching, just for number crunching stakes, that's not my cup of tea. Yeah. And the most favorite one is actually, when I can explore and build things. I love to build things. So anything practical lab work or doing experiments is always very exciting for me.
Oh, that's cool. What quote from a famous person lives in your head rent-free?
Actually, currently it's part of our pitch, and it's not even that long ago that Dr. Judea Pearl mentioned a book. He actually is the author of the Book of Why, which I think is an incredible, powerful question if you follow it all the way to the bottom. And the Twitter message for this Book of Why is causality is not correlation. Mm-hmm. Which is immediately applicable to what we now think about artificial intelligence and all this data crunching, which we actually use at infiniRel. But we follow his book very accurately because we believe that we can be a lot more power and time efficient if we pay attention to causality, cause and effect, which is embedded into our service and product.
Yeah, awesome. Last question from our kind of intro round here. What was the greatest invention or discovery in the past 300 years, in your opinion?
Well, actually, I always smirk a bit when I see the inventor of the internet with this T-shirt saying IP on everything.
Yeah, IP on everything.
The internet has definitely revolutionized. I mean, there's each epoch has, I mean, the steam engine was a big deal, right? The automobile was a big deal. I mean, flight was a big deal. And now the internet is, it's like the foundation of how actually it builds the foundation for new technology building on top. And that's, I think, the real power to shifting an economy, an entire area. And now we're on the verge of thinking about this. Okay, now the internet was a platform that's been now, 30 years ago, but now we're looking at this whole information age, data science part, AI. It's going to be similar impactful.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, let's get into some of those meatier questions. What tech trend significantly impacted your industry, and how did your company respond?
The biggest, well, clearly one of the mega trends that's been now underway and still in its early growth path is electrification. And literally building onto the IP on everything in the 90s, now we have power electronics in everything in the next decade. And that's really driving our mission, or accelerates our mission, because initially we just thought, very myopically, you see the solar panels in my backdrop, which is one of the markets we attended to and started out with. Actually, we pivoted towards batteries, now battery energy storage, for a number of reasons. But now it really becomes a foundation of how we live, how we power everything, how we do transportation, right? And the road and the sky, swimming, floating, flying, everything will be powered by some kind of electronics, because electronics enables making smarter controls, smarter, faster decisions. And that's now really the next decade. I think that's one of those mega trends that we take immediate advantage of. We're helping it by making that electrification reliable.
Yeah, that's really cool. What are 3 technology innovations you are betting on to drive your business growth?
Clearly, AI is one of the key cores. Naturally, we do it a little differently, and that's really what makes it exciting, right? You dare to be different. If you're a startup, you have to be different, right? The other part, it goes back a bit from the foundation. Eventually, at the very beginning, there's some hardware, right? There's something we can touch, feel, sense, and then there's a bunch of software. And at the very end, there's got to be some hardware thing that the software just connects. It's like a hamburger, right? You start with hardware, you end with hardware. And in between, the meat is actually a lot of software. and that's really how I think about it, we have now a lot more powerful manufacturing techniques, which goes towards material science. I mean, just if we're looking at the evolvement, Moore's law and the acceleration of processing itself, right, which a lot is down to technologies that enable to do things smaller and cheaper and faster, in the order of magnitudes. And that certainly helps, man. If we're looking at now, NVIDIA processors, right? I mean, you're looking at incredible data rates that can be processed. And that really helps go hand in hand with that software, with that AI application or multiple application that this enables.
Yeah, totally. We work on we worked with a manufacturing, just because you said, it starts with hardware. Like, hardware does have to advance. Just to be cheeky for a second, I did see somebody had posted a picture of a toothbrush that now has AI in it, right? We now reached the peak of the AI hype, where even a toothbrush is marketing that it has AI inside. But I like what you said, that hardware really, we did a mobile app for a customer that was in manufacturing, And just to kind of go with how you like to test things, there's a Bluetooth device that measures some kind of resonance between the part and a coating that has to go around that part. And so the Bluetooth device had been specially designed to get this reading. And we created the whole mechanics to interact with the Bluetooth device, get it onto the mobile app, collect the data. Once we're back into good Wi-Fi, we can then upload the data all into some Oracle ERP system to do the magic. But without these hardware elements, the software doesn't have arms and legs. It's just kind of, it's kind of squishy sitting there without the keyboard, without the monitor, without the devices to interact with it. The software is just, a bunless hamburger, did you say? Which really, is not much fun, right?
Right. I mean, you're always thinking about the purpose. What is the purpose? And it comes back eventually, we're human beings and we need to interact with things and other human beings. And so it eventually is not really only a virtual exercise per se, but it has a meaning which ties it somehow back to life, right?
Yeah. I want to drill in on this part of what's the biggest technology innovation or advancement that you're really betting on, just so that I can make sure that my listeners understand it. What's the coolest thing you're working on right now?
Well, I think, clearly, if I wouldn't have the passion for what we build here, I should be running a startup. So I think timing is another big component. But really now, over the years, I've seen the problem growing and seeing the financial impact it has also growing. Now it really comes together where you have a higher performance sensing solution, you have higher performance processing solution, you have now the software, the actual machine learning. I started out, and in fact, at the very early beginning in the 20 teens, I had the benefit of participating in NASA's STATOP program. I had 40 hours of rocket scientists to advise me. And my question was, how much stuff did I need to blow up to predict failures with, let's say, 90% confidence interval? I was shocked back in 2010, 2011. Nobody could give me an answer. I said, really? Well, the term machine learning was there, but it was in its infancy. It wasn't truly understood. Now today, completely different story, right? So this comes now all together. It's like a puzzle, right? All the pieces are like, oh, there are all these pieces. Now they actually start to fit. And this image comes together, right?
Yeah. I'd love to see some predictive analytics on that. I'm in Texas and we lost our power for almost a whole week when we were in some freeze. And then eventually it came out that Conagra had not done the necessary winterization maintenance for quite some time. And it was really a 100-year event. But certainly they had major failure. So all the wind turbines shut down. And then as people started drawing more power, it just became kind of a failure of cascading events.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you must be running different scenarios on things like this, or helping folks with all the predictive analytics around those scenarios.
Right. And I'm actually, I'm very well aware that actually there's multiple events in Texas. I lived in Texas for about a decade. And I actually was in Dallas when that February freeze happened. There was a feedwater pipe that froze and it couldn't spool up the steam generators, right? And then it was scrambling. And then actually, it was amazing what impact that did. On the economic side, I think it was Luminant that paid literally $3,001, right, per megawatt hour to Mexico just to get some power into the country. Talking from 50 to 3,001. That's a premium. The sad part was one of the backup generators on one of the Dallas hospitals failed and it actually killed a person. Now, that gets very personal. Now there was more recently, it wasn't freeze related, but there was a grid failure that actually, more on the marketing side, it was a little bit toned down by calling it the Odessa disturbance. Well, it disturbed 9 million people and 4 million at one point didn't have power, and some of them exactly for a week. that actually was caused by a a grid failure that impacted power electronics on solar plants. And it cascaded over 200 miles. And that should not have happened. And actually, if we would have had the chance to analyze, to scan those inverters and test them and say, hey, let's run this proof, let's exercise, and let's put an EKG on them, see how they react when we do change dramatically some power swings, there's a good chance we could have detected the smoking gun says, your control algorithm is not quite well working as it's supposed to be.
Mm.
But they don't know us. We didn't know them yet. So, but I think it's the opportunity moving forward that this are problems that will be more frequent as we adopt more what's called inverter-based resources. That's the technical term for power electronics in renewables that connects clean electrons to the grid, right? And the biggest, let's say, misunderstanding is that let's say the ones that are not intimately involved in this industry, you think, oh, no mechanical parts, right? It's going to last forever. That's the fallacy, because semiconductors don't have the margin for error, for stress that nice older copper-based technologies like motor generators have that use a steam engine. Mm. And that's exactly why we see one of the reasons why we see more failures on power electronic systems. And that's really what drove our mission. Says, okay, we'll need to examine the heart of those systems, literally the heartbeat that beats a couple thousand times faster than our human heart, but principally it's the same.
Love it. Okay, so you're wanting companies to take advantage of new types of sensor data about how their electronics are working, especially in these critical environments. They could literally predict how much longer that thing is going to run. Let me see if I have a good analogy. I use a Mac every day. But I could come to know if my Mac is starting to fail if I was taking advantage of this EKG type system or system monitoring that you're talking of.
Exactly. That's the benefit, right? Because now you can, if you know, you can plan ahead, right? And if you can plan ahead, you said, oh, I might need to drop it off at the Genius Bar my Mac and have him service. Well, for that day, I might just, rent my girlfriend's or my other's computer so I can work around it. So I'm not impacted, right? I'm not impacted. Or the impact is manageable. It's predictably manageable, right? So things are failing, but you smooth that over so that it doesn't impact your personal objective that you have during this incident. And while you are in control, which is really important, right? That's what we give our clients. We give them control. Data is piece of control of your system, of the outcome.
Great. I'm understanding. What's the biggest challenge to maintaining a competitive edge in your industry?
To maintain, well, it's as I think was it Andy Grove was saying at Intel back many years ago. You always got to look in your rearview mirror, right? There's always a different way to skin the cat and do it differently. I think today, we believe that because of that causality, the importance of causality it is very relevant. You just can't truly predict down to a component level the outcome without having this data. Of course, I would run sleepless nights and like, well, what if, just hypothetically, what if you could, right? I mean, there's so much AI power now unleashed and so much data being collected that it's a thesis that we have forward is that I don't think you can do that with generic data, and so far we're proven right so far. But the other point is actually I worked before. We pushed the predictive analytics or prescriptive analytics, which is one step beyond predictive, actually prescribe the fix, is that what if you completely could eliminate inverters, power electronics? What is there something, a new technology coming out that literally makes the state-of-the-art traditional power electronics obsolete. And actually, I worked on a project that was close to doing that, but again, it was one of those things that take a lot of time and money to just prototype, right? And so I decided, well, the time isn't yet.
What are the most significant gaps between your ambitions and the realities of today?
Gaps. Let's see. Let me understand the context of gap. You mean between us and the common approach of predictive failure, or
no? I'm more asking between what exists today, what's available to you today, and where you want to go. Like, where's that gap?
Yeah, well, it's clearly on our roadmap. So where we are today, we have the MVP, the minimum viable product, which is a carry-on suitcase, and you can take it on the flight and can take it to any plant in the world and do a scan. It's you carry a brick around and it's not as convenient, but we really, really need a goal, and we will. This is a part of our roadmap, is that we shrink twice. We first shrink it to what's called an embedded system. So it's really small and tight, like a tablet size. Instead of a carry-on suitcase, it's a tablet. And the next step is that we really reduce this technology onto chip. It really becomes a semiconductor chip or chipset. There's B2. There's an analog and there's a digital chip. Sure. And that's really going back to my industry. And it will take a bit of work and planning and also looking what new technologies, particularly in the semiconductor space, it remains to be super competitive, but also the most scalable way how you bring technologies to the masses. Once you go to chip level, it's light, it's relatively cheap, and it can be pervasive. But as you just mentioned, the toothbrush, right? You put a little chip in the toothbrush and it has AI and it just optimizes the wiggles that the brushes need to do.
I don't know what it does.
At the moment, it inspires me already. It's like, oh man, maybe I need to have one of those. Right? So yeah, I mean, it's all about sensing and optimizing, right? So this is the name of the game. But to get to that level, it's not cheap, not trivial. There's a lot of effort. So we need to really find the right candidates to jump on the bandwagon with us to help conquer this next big size cost reduction step, so that we can be literally it's going to be infiniRel on board, the printed circuit board. Like, that's really where we want to go.
That's cool. How do you approach risk management when implementing these next couple of questions? Are more strategies so we can relate to other CEOs that are growing businesses. How do you approach risk management when implementing cutting edge technology?
Oh, yeah, this is a very important question. In fact, I just infiniRel, we just hired a director of engineering to exactly handle that, right? Since when you do cutting edge, you often don't have necessarily multiple suppliers, right? You're locked into a supplier because of the performance you're pushing. There's a risk, right? So we have to look at, okay, how quickly can we get out of this corner and open up, right? So for example, our carry-on suitcase, right? It's locked. It has a number of single suppliers, which is a risk. So by shrinking it down to build the design in-house on an embedded system, we can make those decisions, which chips to use, right? Which supplier to use. And we can plan for failover, right? We can plan for longevity, right? Automotive has typically these 15 years supplier agreement, right? Before you launch a car, you want to make sure you got 15 years of parts coming in, right? And those things we need to exercise. There's other risk management. Clearly, anything that touches IP, right, is very, very delicate, and that's the lifeblood, right? This is how a startup eventually really exits well, because it has defensible IP, and while a startup doesn't have the funds to defend it, eventually there will be some large funders or large partners helping if there is an assertion on infringement or IP violations or theft, right? So we need to look carefully having really that trusted team is part of that risk management, right? So,
right.
On a need-to-know basis is a really good practice. A lot of industries that are in the high tech have built business processes around that, and these practices, so it's very valuable to maintain. On the soft science, the hardware science is supply chain, the soft science is the knowledge supply chain that needs to be attended to.
Yeah. One of my buddies says the first resource is always a lawyer. Like, the first person I want to start a business. Okay. It's great to talk to not just any lawyer, but a good lawyer that can get your LLC set up or whatever it is. And then, the first person you talk to is always a lawyer. That's what that's kind of his joke. Because that risk management is important. We do a lot of IP counseling when we're talking to startups and working with them on, a few $1,000 to get a copyright or a trademark on something can just save you so much down the road. And just making sure we also talk about like hiring right can be the make or break factor, right? Like hiring good, trusted people, taking your interview process really seriously. So we work with a lot of clients on that. Mm-hmm. I'm curious how you've been connecting your roadmap with your overall business strategy. You mentioned developing a roadmap a couple of times. Mm-hmm. What's your thought process when you're kind of connecting that roadmap with your overall business strategy?
Well, it's like if you watched I think there was a movie documentary, a dramatized documentary on Niki Lauda, Race, I think it's called, where it was competing against Hunt, right? And he said 80% risk, 20% margin and control, right? You never lose completely, you always risk manage. And so even a startup where we clearly, risk averse, right? We are risk takers, but there has to be some control around it where we don't push it too far or overextend, right? So one of my very, very first hires on board when I started the company was a chief operating officer who's done 3 exits. He taught me so much. And he said, never ignore your cash. Your cash is the lifeblood. If you run out of cash, you run out of options. Do not let that happen. So while as an engineer, I must always get Google ads. It's like, oh, great, we need to put that feature in. It's going to be so good. Its performance will be so good. Will be more reliable, right? But now actually I have a similar person, director of engineering with a very, very strong supply chain background and software integration. So she really can oversee both the supply chain scaling as well as the software integration, because actually she was responsible for 200 million printers at Hewlett Packard to not go offline after they've been built when Microsoft pushes an OS update. Cool. So she knows how to scale. And so it's great to have a person like that on our team to really handle that arbitration. It's okay, what is absolute necessary? Right? We have liabilities. We have a contract, right? We're in the money. We making money. We started making money. Hooray. But now there's liabilities, right? How do we backstop any liabilities and concerns that, could come out a non-delivery, right? So that's risk management again. So we got to pick absolutely minimum what is absolutely needed to fulfill that order or that client, thinking a little bit ahead. And then it really becomes a team discussion. It's okay, it's really goes through FMEA, failure method effects analysis. What if this goes wrong? Right? How do we backstop that? Do we reach out? We got to push, right? I'm the eternal optimist. I'm going to push for more. I'm going to push for faster, cheaper, better, right? But then it's okay, we can't do all this at once, right? So we really have to partition this out on the roadmap and overlay that with our clients' demands. And also, the biggest challenge, or one of the challenges that typical, any startup really faces, because we're startups, we're doing something new, right? We're pushing the envelope, we're pushing the edge. That most clients, particularly bigger ones, it takes time to bring them on board, right? So we're going 2 steps ahead, but they are just only ready to absorb step number 1, right? And that's really important because this is one of the painful lessons I learned over time, that if you go too fast and you can't take the team and the clients with you, you actually produce that gap or a gap. You mentioned gap. I think this is another gap that's dangerous because you fall in and it's going to be hell to get out of this gap again, right? Because you just spend more money, just put more time, you put reallocated resources, not where they make you immediately money to go to the next month, the next quarter. Like that's going to be very tactical. This is the 20% you gotta be very focused on in order to survive as a business. Unfortunately, like we have survived quite a number of years, so I think I have a bit of a track record that way. But now it's actually part to scale and go into an operational mode where the process becomes now company wide.
Yeah, I think we look at this idea of like how much dry powder do I have, and dry powder can be in the form of cash on hand. It can be in the form of market opportunity. Like I have this demand that's sitting here, so you have that on one side. Then you have your team, and you have this thing of like known quantities of work. How much thinking have we done to really understand what that next steps are? And so when we look at the roadmap, we look at this intersection point where can I really work on more than one thing at a time? Can I really break this down and know and look at what is my backlog of known things that I need to do versus my team? How much planning have I done? And then how much dry powder do I have, right? There's this inflection point of like, hey, if I had 2 engineering teams, could I move faster? Or if I had additional engineers, could I move faster? And we look at those factors of, well, you really don't have that much planned work. So adding engineers at this point is a nice idea. Like, let's do that, but let's come in and do the design, do the definition so that we have that clear roadmap. I've even put roadmaps together and then looked at, okay, this is a great roadmap. How much clarity do each of these items on this roadmap have? Because there's 2 kind of currencies, I think, for a startup. One is clarity and the other is focus. And so if we have clarity, then we can get focused, and then we have a cool cycle of efficiency and can really ramp things up.
Yeah. You make a very good point. I mean, that's, I think, often the distracting factor, right? Clarity across the team, right? So it's important to communicate frequently, even if it's short, but communicate frequently. And always get, and our director of engineering really does a really, really good job in just making sure that everybody is on board and shares the vision and sees the both opportunity as this is a drive of energy, positive energy, but also sees the risk mitigation part and says, okay, well, but that's our risk part, how we are aware of that. So let's work around it or find a solution for that. Without breaking the bank again. Right? So it's always a bit of tightrope walk along the way.
Yeah. I mean, since you're building a growing team, how do you cultivate a culture of innovation and digital fluency inside of your organization?
That actually is one of the 3 tasks. And I actually have to also quote another startup CEO here from the Valley, Silicon Valley, who mentioned as a CEO, you really have 3 tasks, right? Number 1, you raise funds. Number 2, you build a team. Number 3, you build a culture. And often the culture is neglected. And I've seen this from corporate America, that culture actually is the part that breaks teams eventually. So how do you do this is not trivial. It really comes back to the frequency, but also the quality of communication, right? Everything is rooted in trust, and trust doesn't come automatically, right? For some, it comes faster, so some not. Actually, I remember when I was a child, my parents had this incredible argument, right? So my dad, who ran a company at the time, a small company, nevertheless, he said, I don't trust anyone. They have to prove that they're worthy, right? My mom was the opposite. My mom was exactly, it's like, no, you extend trust by building trust. You extend it first so you get it back. And so they had this really polarized vision. And I was watching both. It's like, this is interesting. Like, where do you fall on? I think it's going in fast, small steps. I err a little bit more towards my mom saying, it's like, okay, you extend trust, right? But you have to risk manage. You can't hang yourself out the window too fast, too quickly, right? You give them a little bit and see what responds back. And then when it comes back to the very very, very well known, simple, how do you call this, idioms, like you do what you say and you say what you do, right? So you articulate what you do, what you want to do, but then you actually do it. Oh, okay, you said you do it, and then you did it. When if something goes sideways, well, it's again communication. It's like, okay, inform fast, right? Build that trust quickly. And I think an incredible example today, which is a little scary, but hey, this is, I think, still a very good example where the culture of Boeing from the early days when they built the Boeing 727, which was the impossible airliner, to today is compared, where there was this complete disconnect between upper, C-level management and actually, right, the boots on the ground, so to speak, where when the safety culture, which is so important, right, for the clients, for the passengers, for me, right? If that's broken, and now we've got these repeated events, and then you realize to some of the reports that it's like, well, maybe that safety culture has not been incentivized, right? Because if you don't disclose that there's a problem, how can you fix the problem, right? And that goes back to the way how things are communicated, right? Not being assertive, not being assertive in a negative way, accusative, right? But saying, okay, let's look at the facts, what has happened, and then break that problem down into the root cause, and then give that we are humans, we all make mistakes. So I made a whole slew of them, right? So it's like, yeah, acknowledging that and says, okay, let's learn from that. Let's not do that again. Right? Important part. Do it again, then that has different consequences, right? Then there has to be an escalation, right? But that's, I think, a good way to build that essential trust, to build a team fast. And then there's another element comes in, especially today, where we have multiple cultures working together, right? In multiple countries. We're a remote team, right? We have actually different folks on our team, and each one has a different upbringing, which means they're cultured differently to begin with. Having that, that space available to say, okay, I understand that that person may come from a different position. They may have been trained differently, right? There was this great counselor in Austin that I saw decades ago. It was fascinating. He compared the culture of the US versus the culture of Germany. And since I lived in both continents, it's like, well, I can compare very well. And he said the project progress, right, was in America essentially was, rapid progress. And then, oops, shit, stepping back, it was like a ratchet going up, right? And then you had the compare chart which said like, well, here's a German engineer working on this project, right? It's like, a lot of planning, says hardly any progress. Like, what's the hell is going on? This thing's dead in the water, right? And the last 90% was execution, right? So it's you reached at the same position, completely different ways. And now it's really important to see, well, who's on our team operates which way, right? So to accommodate that, and then finding a balance between both to accommodate both parts. Both has an advantage, right? I mean, the US ratchet way, like fast forward, then oops, correct, fast forward, oops, correct, right, has its way, because all of a sudden you make a lot of iterations. You learn a lot of different things. Well, versus the German way, it's like, okay, this is like a lot of planning, a lot of looking at things, a lot of debate, really planning out well, seeing all the pros, throwing all the cons before you make the decision. And then it's like, okay, I think we got it, execute, run, right?
Yeah.
And it's a different way to do that. And integrating this into a company it's kind of be fun. Right, but it takes an open mind and particularly respect for other viewpoints. But that's really important, I think, to really build that trust and build that way to be able to adapt and bring people in.
Yeah, you said so many good things there. Just to summarize a little bit, yeah, I think a CEO's job is micromanaging the culture like 100%. And then I loved what you said about, we call it internally something called blamelessness. So even if it's like the guy comes in and says, hey, I fat fingered the thing, it's my fault. You say, okay, wait a minute. Like, let's take a step back here. What was the surrounding event? And we use this analogy in medicine. They used to put two medicines next to each other, one that could kill you and one that could help you, but they both started with the letter A, right? They were in alphabetical order. And then somebody eventually said, hey, we need to keep the ones that could kill you over here and the ones that can help you over here. But the poor nurse that grabbed the wrong one, he or she gets kind of like on the chopping block for making the mistake. We would say that that's their fault. So thinking of the system that the people are working within, figuring out how to make the system more fault tolerant, making it easier. And I realize that there's a limit if somebody is just not performing well or being sloppy with their work. So then we also talk about like details matter. Like it's important to have attention to detail. It's also something else that you said. It's important to be proactive. Proactive is kind of a little bit of everything. It's proactively communicating when things aren't going wrong. It's being proactive to respond to something that could go wrong by bringing the right level of details. I've seen organizations completely transformed by one person who I would phrase as the bell ringer, right? Hey, something's going wrong. Poop, poop. Everybody come together. Like we need to get on this because this is not quite right. And that person can make a whole career out of being the person that brings everybody together because something is not right. And I've just seen in many organizations where that alarm ringer is just essential to the culture because hey, this is going to be a bad thing. Let's come together and let's fix it. So a lot of great things that you said there that we're also that are kind of right at our fingertips too. The ability to give one thing we're really working on right now is how we give each other feedback, how we talk to each other about like, hey, I'm experiencing you as being sloppy with this particular kind of work. Can you tighten this up? And not being afraid, even peer to peer, to be able to say these things to each other so that we can make each other better.
Yeah, well, there's this let's say rule, like your applaud in company and you penalize in private, right? So you raise those issues on a one-on-one basis, but then you share the good results within the team, right? So it's it's not smeared out, right? There's always bad news, so we'll contain the bad news to the minimum level it has to be maintained. So the overall team isn't impacted right away, or it's kind of as a need to know basis. Right? It really needs to know what stuff what's supposed to happen. Right?
I would agree with that up until the point where, we also love when the person that made the mistake is willing to teach others through that mistake. So there's been a couple of situations we've run into where the person. Where we said, hey, if you'd be willing, I think other people could learn from this mistake. And so they put a presentation together and say, hey, look at this thing I did because I was thinking this way instead of this way. And just want to share it with all of you. And that is a redemptive story, right? That I could make a mistake, but use that mistake to teach others.
And it shows that it is not only okay, it is actually appreciated, right? It's like it doesn't have that bad context. Oh, you messed up, right? And now you're fired. No, it's like you messed up and now you have the opportunity to actually not only do it better, but you share results and it's valued by the rest that you actually step forward and had this humbleness of like, yeah, I messed up this time. This is what we learned. This is actually one thing, my very sparse spare time, I have these 10, 15 minutes. I sometimes watch these air crash investigations. And it's fascinating about learning is it's never one item. It's always, it's like this Swiss cheese model, right? All the holes have to line up before it actually, there's a pass through, right? And it teaches me so much. And although I think it could freak out a lot of people, just like when it's like, oh my God, all these disasters happening that we often don't hear in the TV or in the news. They're all there. They're all logged. They're all tracked. It's all information you can get through the FAA, right?
Outages,
but on the other side.
Outages in general, are a series of, I call them lemony snickets, right? A series of unfortunate events. it's never really just one person fat fingering. It's usually like a series of things, like the Dallas or the Texas power grid thing, right? That's a series of things, like you mentioned. It's never just like one thing. And I think that we see that with the team is there's this outage. We all feel really responsible for it, but it was like a series of things that we can discuss and figure out how to prevent those. What was the lessons learned from just a failed tech initiative, like a tech initiative that failed to deliver expected results? Do you have like one lesson or a story you can tell about something that didn't go your way?
Well, clearly, I mean, before we returned to prescriptive diagnostics, the timing wasn't right initially. So, and then I worked on a project that was actually that inverterless, motor generator that was binding the teeth out, right? And we prototyped it, and it's just like, it just didn't work. It should work. When it didn't work, why didn't it? Right? That was super frustrating, right? Because we spent a lot of time and, of course, money on this thing. And then eventually said, we'll need to pull back. We'll need to have an expert, right? And the interesting part by this opening up and this looking at why is this the case? Who else had this problem? By that time, my VP of operations, actually mechanical engineer, that's why he was really working so hard on this thing. He actually found someone that wrote his thesis on 90% of our machine. And I was in awe. It's like, wow. And the thesis was making the same assumptions we had. It's supposed to work. It should work. The professor and the PhD candidate both went down this path. And at the end, they concluded, oh, it doesn't. It can't work. And then he figured out the physics, why it couldn't work. And that was the aha moment. And also the lesson learned that, okay, we should have a little bit earlier taken that outside counsel or that look to the outside. That's we lost a lot of time, and time is money and burn rate to get to that point. That we had to make the decisions like, okay, until we really get a electromagnetic scientist on the team, $1 million and a year to prototype, it's not going to go. And that essentially was the little late outcome. I mean, it was painfully late, and it hasn't killed the company, which is good. We're still here. Actually, we're now in somewhat to bloom, but
I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that. That's great. That seeking outside experts, seeking like, we talk a lot internally in software dev about like not relying on your own understanding, relying on your own effort to implement, but really looking for the best practice behind the thing that you're implementing. And every time, this is just something we just like really try to make 100% thing, where go look at that, the best practice. Go look at, if you're trying to data model something, don't try to sit there and spend a bunch of time working on the model from scratch. Go look, because these things exist out there. And in your case, there was the paper, there was the research. And so, yeah, not relying completely on your own understanding, your own effort. Yes. But if you can find that road traveled ahead of time, what a great story. I appreciate you sharing that.
And you made a really good point with the outside counsel. This is actually the value of having really a very good advisory board, both on the technical as well as on the business side, from folks that have been there and done that really that expert experience really comes to fruition. When I really think about this, we had this amazing gentleman on our team, and I think by the time we met, he had 79 patents to his name. Incredible resource. And I remember actually in hindsight that, there was a moment where he actually voiced the concern. He said, I'm not sure this actually will work.
Right.
But it was just, it was very high context, right? It's like, he wasn't as forward, and that actually where this culture comes in. The German is like, hey, spell it out. Tell me exactly why. That's okay. Just don't be vague. If it's vague, it's like, no, we're going to push forward with this, right? That was a bit the lesson learned after the fact that, it's like, there was a very early indication of a concern that I didn't acknowledge large enough that I should have, because if I would have done that, I would have had not actually wasted so much more time, right? I would have been a lot more acquisitive and tested things out differently first. I mean, eventually we did have a test plan. The test plan didn't show the results by orders of magnitude, which means that's not just a rounding error. This is like some fundamental flaw in it. But it was shown ahead of time. Just slightly.
Yeah, that spilled milk, man. That hindsight, man. It's a wonderful teacher. But I think everybody has these kinds of tuition. I call them tuition payments, right? These lessons that we paid for that are so much better than paying for a class or whatever, because they become part of our DNA. I want to be respectful to your time. It's been great hearing about infiniRel and getting to know you. Where should people connect with you? How would you like people to follow up if they like what they've heard today?
Yeah, my power tool is actually LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn since 2004, and so that's the best way to reach out with me. Since I do get a lot of requests, I would just advise be to the point. Either ask me how I can help, or suggest how they can help. Right? Make it tangible. Just one keyword that is make it tangible, so it becomes an actionable point, is all that I'm responding to. If it's just a connect, and I have to spend time to figure out why this person possibly want to connect, that's hard. Time is a very, very limited resource. But if it says like this quick 30-character message or 100-character message saying, hey, tell me more about this, I think I have a similar experience, want to talk to you about ABC, that'll be great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been great hanging out with you, and thanks for being.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It looks like you've got some wealth of experience that we'll need to have maybe another chat over another beer or wine, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I'll be coming to Texas too, right? Texas has, actually, I was just in Austin and Southwest, so that was amazing, as usual. Right? Every year, it's a bigger and better. So.
Awesome.